One of the key skills you will need as you write your Run.js custom checks is knowing how to output the data to the screen, in a table format or via text. This is what we'll cover in the session today. Hey everyone, welcome to this session where I'm going to go through the different mechanisms you can use to output your data from your Avantra Run.js custom checks to the console so that they can be consumed by the operators of the system. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So here I have my Avantra system, and if I pop into Systems and Servers, I have a single operating system set up here using Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Everything I'll be talking about today is completely platform agnostic. So if you're using Windows or another distribution of Linux, this will work the exact same way. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to pop into the configuration menu, into custom checks, and we're going to create a brand new custom check today. The first scenario I'm going to use is a very simple output. It's where you have some text and you want to output it to the screen. So here I'm going to create a Run.js custom check for my customer mastering Avantra. I'm going to execute it on the server and I'm going to call it MA simple custom or simple output. So we hit create, and now we're inside in our development environment for our Run.js custom check. Now, those of you who've watched previous videos know I always use this feature over here to pin what I'm working on and to bring it into its own tab, so it's a little bit bigger and easier to work with. And going back to our hygiene, we always make sure we give a description. So this is a simple custom check, custom check showing a text output. I'm going to execute this as a real-time monitoring, so it executes every 5 minutes by default, and I'm very happy for it to be 5 minutes. The system selector, so this is where the check is executed. I will be selecting my system selector that I had in place already, which is all production Red Hat Enterprise Linux instances. Now, a note here about development. It's always good to do your development on one particular test system to start off with, rather than selecting a selector that has hundreds or thousands of systems within it. Just because as you're building up the check, as you're testing it, you don't want to be sending errors to all these different systems by default. So make sure you have a development selector set up specific to where you're going to be testing your code as you're building it. So let's go ahead and get started. I always start my scripts with the name, so cc name is equal to, and I copied this from earlier. So there's my custom check name, and then my version is equal to 1.0, just like that. All right, so that's the hygiene taken care of. Now let's do a sample output. Every custom check, every Run.js custom check has a number of objects available as standard. One of the main ones you're going to interact with is an object called check. And this has two outputs, message, and it has check.status. So in this case, message takes a string. So this is my first output. Hello, world. Just like that. And then I'm going to set the check status to OK. Now, I could also set it to warning, or I could set it to critical as well. So these are the statuses that are available to me as standard within the Run.js environment for me to set my, my output to. So in this case, I'm going to hit apply. It'll ask me, as this is a brand new check, do I want to activate it? And I say yes. And then I'm going to send to agent. Now, a note here about the send to agent. If you waited, the Avantra master server will automatically send this updated configuration to the agent the next time it checks in. That happens about once every 5 minutes. So as we're doing development and as we want things to progress a little bit faster, we hit the send to agent button, which proactively sends the updated changes across the network to the agent that we're testing on. So if I pop into servers, I've got the one server I have configured, and if I open it up and go to checks, I'm going to do a search for MA underscore, which is the name of the check I used, and we can see here that I have MA simple output, which has come back 34 seconds ago with this is my first output, hello world. And if I click in, I see that the status is OK, and I'm good to go. Equally, if I came in here and I changed this to one of the other options, so I said critical, just like that, hit apply, and send to agent in a few seconds, and it takes 30 to 60 seconds for the changes to be sent to the agent, for the agent to execute them and then send back the data, then I will see the update in the output here on the server. It all depends on your network topology as to how quickly this happens. If you've gateways in the middle or whatever the case may be, this can take a little bit longer. But in a few minutes, we should see this go red, and it'll be just like that. So now it's gone red, and we can see that it's in critical status. So that's a simple output. The second type we're going to talk about today is the table output. So this is a little bit more involved. So let's dig in and try it. So I'm going to go to custom checks, and I'm going to create another custom check. Again, of the type run.js, which you can find if you scroll down here. And I'm going to execute on the server, and I'm going to say MA table output. I'm going to copy that and hit create. So again, we're going to use the pin to give ourselves full screen. And in the description, this is a sample table output. I'm going to go for real-time monitoring once every 5 minutes. And I'm going to execute this on my test systems, which is my all prod rel selector. Now, again, starting with hygiene. So I've got my constant, which is cc name, and that's equal to just like that. And const cc version is equal to 1.0. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch our video on debugging, you might be wondering why I keep putting in constants with the custom check name and the custom check version. There is a whole section on debugging which I encourage everybody to watch, which allows you to use this information in log outputs, which can be very useful if you're trying to track down an error or track down an issue. So this is why I always put this in up the top. So please do watch that other Mastering Avantra video on run.js debugging. It will be very useful to you, and it'll explain why I do this at the top of every one of my checks. Okay, so we're going to output to a table. What does a table consist of? It consists of a series of headers at the top, and it consists of a series of data. Now, for readability purposes, I like to break these two things into functions. I don't just like having massive amounts of procedural statements. I like to break them into reusable chunks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function called build table headers, like this. And in here, I'm going to define all of the table headers that I need to have in my output. And how I do this is I say check dot, let me just get my sample here just to make sure I've got this right, add table column, oops, and I'm going to have a value. So that's how I add a table column. And in my output here, I'm going to have two of these. Now, actually, I'm missing something here. I've skipped a step. What data are we actually outputting? Now, normally when you're doing a custom check or a run.js custom check, you will have data as an output from a command, from an SQL statement, from an SAP function, and you'll be parsing that in order to put it out on screen. Just for the purposes of this, I'm just going to use some sample data. So I'm going to say var sample data is equal to. Now, because I'm dealing with a table, I'm going to have an array. Now, this is where having a background or at least an understanding of basic JavaScript will really help you. But square brackets in this case means an array. And I'm going to create an array of objects. Now, my objects are going to be very simple. They're going to have a name, and this one's going to be called banana. And it's going to have a status. And in this case, my status is going to be okay. And I'm going to put in two more. So I'll copy this, paste, and paste. Notice they're separated by a comma here. So banana, apple, and kiwi. And okay, warning, and critical. Now actually case matters in this case. So I'm just going to change that to warning like that. Okay, so now we have our sample data, which is 3 entries in our array. One for banana, one for apple, and one for kiwi. So the table columns for my output are going to be very simply name and status, just like that. So this is function to build our output table column headers. Okay, so that's the first function. The second function we're going to need actually puts the data into the table. So let's do that next. So we'll copy and paste this down here. Function to add data to our table. So add data to table is the name of the function, and we'll say data object. And we're going to use some new functions here. So we're going to say check dot add cell. And what that does is it adds an entry into the table into a specific cell. So we're going to need two of these. So we're going to say check.addCell, and we're going to say data object dot name and data object dot status. Now, where did I get name and status from? It's from here, because I know the structure of my data contains a name and it contains a status. So just like that, I will add data to a table. Now, I've forgotten something here. I can't just add cells, because how would it know where the cells need to reside? I need to tell it at the start of each data entry, check.add row, like this. And that adds a new row to the table, and then we add the data into that row for the table. Okay, nice and simple. And then finally, we need to call our functions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build table headers, like that. And now we're going to loop through our array of data, and we're going to add that data to the output table. So this is the way I'm going to do it for readability. There is absolutely faster and smaller ways of doing it, but feel free to do that in your own time. So var counter sample data equals 0. And then I'm going to use a for loop. So for counter sample data equals 0, counter sample data is less than sample data dot length, and then counter sample data plus plus. Okay, so now I'm looping through the data one by one. Next, I need to call the function to add data to table, and here we'll say sample data counter sample data, just like that. Okay, let's go through this one more time. So first of all, we build the table headers, and then loop through our data and output it to the check result. So we're looping using this counter in this sample data, and we're saying for all of the sample data, loop through, and for each item, add data to table, sample data, counter sample data. All right, I think we're just about ready to run this. Let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to hit apply, and because it's a new check, it's going to say, do I want to activate it? And I say yes, and then I send to the agent, just like that. Again, this part takes sometimes it can take 10 seconds, sometimes it can take 60, depending on your network topology. But let's pop over to servers, and we're going to go back to the server, and we're going to go to the checks. And now, aha, we have an error. So MA table output, you can see it's red, and we see script error. Okay, this is really good, because now we get to have a look and see, okay, not sure what's happening here. So script error, type error, invoke error, add row on this, failed due to unknown identifier, add row. Okay, let's have a look. We've obviously got something wrong in our syntax here. So I said check.add row. Aha, I know what I did wrong. It's not add row, my apologies. It's new row. So we hit apply, we send to agent, send, and we're going to come back here. Now this is going to update in a couple of seconds. This gives me the opportunity to tell you about our custom check repository where you can find sampled code exactly like the one I'm working on right now. And this is available at bit.ly/Avantra-CC. The CC here stands for custom check. So Avantra-CC. It's a bit.ly link. This will take you to a public repository where we have lots of samples that you can choose to look at and have a look through. So here we can see our output is working perfectly. The check status is green, and we have our 3 entries in our table, just like that. Now, in this case, we can see that a few of our items are okay, or a few of them are warnings, some are critical. And it's kind of difficult to read that. It would be nice if this was color-coded based on their status. This is really easy to do. So if I pop back to here, inside in our add data to table, we are calling the function check.addCell. Now this can take one of two arguments, or rather there's one argument that's required, which is the one we're giving, which is the text we want to display in the table. There's an optional second argument to color code it. And this takes one of three things. It can take OK, critical, or warning, which will be green for OK, critical is red, and warning is yellow. So in this case, I'm going to set it to the status because the status has already got this text in it. So if I do that, like this, then theoretically what should happen here, and I'm just going to send it to the agent while I explain, is it should color code it based on this entry. So what we should see is banana with green text, apple with a yellow warning, and kiwi with a red critical. Let's go back to servers, refresh our output, boom. Just like that, we now have color coded the output of our custom check so that it's easier to read and easier to draw attention to specific items. The final thing is you can combine the simple output I showed earlier, where you have check.message, with the table output. And in this case, you kind of use the check.message as a summary of what's in your table. So here I can say check.message equals, as the very last thing I do, which is analysis complete, and I'm going to count, so I say sample data.length records analyzed. Okay, so what this means is there's going to be a summary at the top of the output saying analysis complete, 3 in this case, records analyzed, and then it'll show the table. Let's hit apply and send to agent. And this is powerful as well if you have a table with 100 entries and there might be 2 that you want to draw attention to. It's nice to have that text at the top of the table that says analysis complete. You know, there are 3 you need to pay attention to, or whatever the case may be. Maybe a summary of an error or something along those lines. So let's refresh. It still hasn't executed yet, so it's still sending the updated custom check to the agent. The agent is executing and will send back the results. And once we refresh, there we go, analysis complete, 3 records analyzed, and there we go. So that's it. That's how you build your outputs of your custom checks. We did a simple output first, which showed just some text and how to set the status of the check. And the second example we did was building a table to show data and how to color code that data. And then finally, we combined the output table and the check.message to show a summary as well as a table. Hope you enjoyed this session, and please watch more of Mastering Avantra videos on our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us.